Okay, students of Conversation 3, here we are. It is week 3, and I hope most of you are not younger students. Some of you may be taking another conversation at the same time here, but most of you should know how to use the cyber campus and know how to navigate, so I'm not going to go over that. If you have any questions, first of all, I'm not an expert about managing the cyber campus. I'm doing pretty much everything that way for the first semester ever. I try to use some of my own tools, but most students are familiar from other professors with submitting assignments and so on. So all of our assignments are being processed through the cyber campus, so you have to log in. And hopefully you can see the deadline is approaching for your first assignment, which is a self-introduction. Now, if you have any problems, you can contact the English department office because Mr. Yongnam is actually an expert, whereas I'm usually asking him for directions. So if you have any issues, you might want to give him a call because he can probably answer you quickly in Korean. Rather than emailing me technical problems. If you have a question about the class, don't bother him, ask me in English, and I'll explain to you what you need to do. So, we've done one chapter. We talked about happiness last class. Our topic for today is looking for a job. Now, the Conversation 1 class also had a job topic last week, so don't be confused if you are taking Conversation 1 at the same time because you didn't take that earlier, even though you're a senior, you never took that credit and you're taking it at the same time. This is the same topic, but we're gonna take a different approach than the younger students are doing, okay? Now, what I wanna do really is talk about looking for jobs because the students who take these classes usually are juniors and seniors. And in Korea, normally people don't take a break. They actually try to get a job before they've even completed their undergraduate work. Now that happens in Canada and America too, but there are people like myself who do part-time jobs, or there's people who travel, or people who just, they're burnt out from finishing their undergraduate work and they just need a few months off before they get into searching for jobs. So there is a whole process, right? For getting a job, you need to get together a resume and you have to apply. And then if you get past that screening process, they usually offer you an interview. And if you get interviewed, there might be multiple stages. In Korea, there might be a test as well. You might have to do a test first and then an application and then an interview, and then be selected from a smaller group of people, right? So there's usually like a whittling down process of the candidates, especially if it's a job that's really popular. When I was applying for a job here, I was told that there were 25 candidates and there were 2 positions, which is pretty competitive, but it can be a lot harder than that. The numbers can be extreme. There can be hundreds of people for 2 positions if it's a really desirable job. So you have to think about, I want you to think about what types of things that you want to do, but I want you to think of what qualifications. I want you to talk about what kind of qualifications you need. It's always a good idea to do some volunteer work, I think, to kind of round out your experience. If you're studying, you probably don't have time to do much training or job related things that might be helpful for your career directly. So part-time jobs are always good. It demonstrates that you know how to work hard. If you work in a factory like I did, and you get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and you're reliable, and you punch in at 6 o'clock and you work hard every day until 4:30. It's a 10-hour day, 5 days a week, and you do it all summer, and then the next summer they hire you back. That looks really good. It doesn't matter what job you're applying for. It means you can handle factory work, and you work hard, and you're reliable, and you perform well enough at your job for somebody to want you back. This is sort of almost like an experience reference. So you're going to want references from people, but people can lie. But if you show people that you've actually worked at a company, and you show them, the bank deposits of the earnings from that company, that's a fact. Nobody can lie about that. So that was helpful for me, even though the experience of working in a factory, I have to admit, was like, it was like hell being in there. It was a locker factory, and I spent 3 summers there, 8 months in total. We were producing lockers for schools and toilet partitions for bathrooms. We did sports lockers too. We actually made the sports lockers for the Colorado Avalanche, which is a professional hockey team. That was pretty fun because it was different than normal. But basically, it's just really repetitive work. So this is my work experience, and I used that to get a job after university because I did those summer jobs. But that's not very common in Korea. So volunteer work and extracurricular things and being in clubs and part-time jobs and internships and licenses are the things that usually round out your resume. If you're a senior, you probably already realize this. And so you're trying to finish your undergraduate education and round out your resume and then immediately step into a job right away. The thing is that traditional jobs have started to change. Some of them have started to disappear. And I only say traditional jobs because I'm talking about, traditional jobs in our generation. I don't mean shoemakers are out of work, or that blacksmiths don't have any work to do, because those jobs disappeared 300 years ago when the Industrial Revolution began, right? But we are in something called, we're transitioning from, a previous industrial level to a new one. We're going into this 4th industrial age. Now, just like I say in my British and American culture class, this doesn't mean that suddenly everything's going to change. It's just a blanket term. There's no line. We're not going to be in the 4th industrial revolution after the coronavirus is over. And we're not actually going to be out of the pandemic suddenly either. That's a good thing to remark on. Some people think that, one day we're going to wake up and the coronavirus is going to be gone. That's not what's going to happen. It's going to gradually diminish its effect on our lives, but it's going to be there for a long time. Perhaps it's going to be around indefinitely. I don't want to say forever, indefinitely. We don't know how long it's going to be around. This has caused sort of a revolution, or it's at least sped up the change, if you don't want to call it a revolution because it's not fast enough. It's remote work, like what I'm doing now, digital communication, video conferencing, reduced reliance on physical contact and transportation is the thing that we're living in. So when I ask you about this topic this semester, I want you to apply it somehow to our current situation, because you're all in the position to be looking for work, and it's important for you to consider what types of work you want to do in this environment, right? And what is available and what is going to be sustainable, right? What down the road, if you get into a certain type of work where the job market is shrinking, that might not be a good idea. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do that if that's your passion, but I think you need to consider what jobs are going to be, sought after, which jobs are going to be at a premium, what jobs are going to offer you more stability, and what jobs are going to be continue to draw people for at least the next 10 or 20 years, right? You don't want to get into something that doesn't have a market right after university, because then you're going to have to reset. So you have to go through this process. You can see on the opening page, it talks about how U.S. students attend college or university, usually for 4 years. They earn a bachelor's degree. After that, they can attend graduate school and earn a master's degree, or a doctorate, which is a PhD. And if you're a medical doctor, it's called an MD, which is a medical doctorate. And I'm currently working on my PhD, so I'm familiar with that level. It's kind of level 1, 2, and 3, but there's kind of 2 branches as well. In Canada, you go to university, you get a bachelor's degree, and if you go to college, you get a diploma. You get a college diploma. And it's not that one of them is more valuable than the other, but there's a status connection because the universities are bigger and they have more money and they get academic recognition and publicity for research and for, developing ideas. Whereas colleges are more for training and for practical work. So it depends on what you're going to do. You might need both. But if you're going to do something that requires actual practical knowledge and training, then a college degree is actually important. So you might want to, in Korea it's less common to do this, but you may have to in some cases. In Canada, for example, if you want to be a teacher, you do your bachelor degree first, and then you go to teacher's college to get the training, and then you get a teacher's license, get a certificate that approves your ability to manage a classroom, and then you can teach. You need both for that. If you want to be a police officer, you have to go to a police academy, it's police college. There's lots of things. If you want to be an electrician, or you want to be a plumber, or you want to do any sort of technical work, college is much better for that. So you have to consider, even though you're in university now, you have to consider what other things that you might need. So I want you to consider what job you're interested in, and then tell me what aspect about that job you're interested in, and tell me why it could be relevant in this situation, in this environment, in this job market, how your job fits in, okay? So I want you to go, not just describe your personal interest and what aspects of the job you like. I want you to justify yourself in choosing that job. Maybe pretend I'm one of your relatives, right? And you're explaining to your relatives at Chuseok why you want to study this, and they're looking at you and saying, that's interesting. That's not a traditional type job, but that's an interesting idea, right? And you have to convince them that what you want to do is a good idea, okay? That's what you have to do with me. There's all kinds of things that you can't control. The job market expands and contracts. You can't control the pandemic. So, people are losing their jobs and jobs are becoming available. Companies that are not doing well, they downsize and they reduce their staff. So one thing you want to do, as I said, is get a lot of well-rounded. You want a well-rounded resume. It's what I would say. You want to diversify your portfolio. It's the same thing you do with once you start making money. You don't put all your money in one thing. You put some money in stocks, some in bonds, some in savings accounts, some in investing in a house, some in a pension fund, some in ETFs. You put your money, you spread it out. You buy some gold, and then as things go up and down, you're still sort of in a balanced position. If you have extracurricular activities, you join some clubs, you finish your degree, you have some computer licenses, you have some job experience, you have some personal connections and good references, you have a diversified resume, and that will help you get a job, right? This is what you need to do. So there's some explanations in the book, just like I'm doing, about looking at the responsibilities and requirements of jobs. Just remember, I want you to put it in the context, like in the current context, whereas this is real life for you, right? You've got to apply what's happening now and what's going to happen in the future to your answer. So that's part of having a good answer here, is not just giving me information, but making it relevant to the fourth industrial revolution, the pandemic, and certain types of jobs, and your personal interest as well. Consider those three factors. Okay, so think about positive things that can happen to people at work. This is a question on the top of page 16. And think of the negative things too. There is a good word in English called a contingency. And a contingency is a fancy word for having another plan. If something doesn't go, the first plan doesn't execute or occur the way that you expected, then there's other options. There's another option. There's an extra thing that'll kick in to replace the first one. The common thing to say is just to call it plan B. I have a plan A, this is my first choice, but if that doesn't work, there's a plan B. And there may be a plan C and so on, plan D and so on down the list. But I think there's a tendency in Korean culture to go like, just narrow your vision on a certain job and then put everything into it. And that means there's a higher chance of you getting that job. So that's an upside. The upside of putting all of your energy and all of your training and all of your education towards one thing. However, there's some serious downsides. For example, that once you do all that, you realize that isn't what you like to do now. The education was maybe better than the circumstances of the job. So this is also something you need to be aware of. Recently, I was talking to a friend of mine who was working in a startup, and they're developing a shot that if you take it regularly, once a month, it'll prevent and treat Alzheimer's. Really cool technology, right? And I think she studied biology. She's in her late 20s. And she got the job, and she worked at the startup for a couple of years. And she realized she didn't like being in a laboratory all the time, and didn't like, reporting and checking data and processing information, and developing this treatment. So she quit. She gave 1 month notice and she quit. And I didn't want to pry, which means I didn't want to ask her to get into her private business. So I don't know what she switched to, but she already had all that education and experience. And it sounded like to me that she wanted to do something very different. So if you funnel all of your energy and effort into one thing, even if you do get it, you might find out that that's not exactly what you wanted to do. So my approach was quite different. I tried every different subject. I tried biology and chemistry. I failed math, science, calculus in university, to my embarrassment. And I took history and philosophy and classics and French. French I enjoyed. I liked history too. But I sampled as many different classes as I could. Economics, and then I decided I liked English. And then when I finished, I didn't know what I was going to do, so I got a part-time job as an English, writing tutor in a private school, which was an international school that taught ESL. And then after I did that for a while, I went back to a factory for 4 months just to make money to come here. And I've been here ever since. I've been here over a decade. I'm starting to stop counting the years because it's been over 10 years. I've been in Chungnam for 12. So there was never a plan B in my case, but there was never a plan A either. So that's not the best approach though. I mean, I sort of knew that teaching always could be my backup if I didn't find anything else, but it ended up being my primary interest. Once I started teaching at that private school part-time, I realized that I did really like teaching, and then I made the decision to come to Korea, to come to Asia, and so I stopped that job in September, because that's when the Canadian year starts. And then I just worked for temporarily for 4 months at a factory as a temp, as we call it in English, a temporary worker. I worked as a temp for 4 months just to save enough money to get here and have a laptop and a little bit of stuff for my room. And then I just worked as a teacher and saved money and never left. So anyway, this is what I would like you to do. I would like you to look at your own future. Maybe this is what you want to do too. Maybe you want to do some part-time work, stay at home a little bit like I did, figure out what you really like, get some experience, and then make a, I had a sort of a gap of 1 year, which is very common, like I said, in North America. Lots of people don't jump into their career right away. I didn't even know when I came here it was going to be my career, but that's basically what it is. And careers are a lot shorter. Keep that in mind now. I could jump out of university life and try and get a job in another field. Lots of people spend 5 years at one job and then switch jobs, or 10 years. And some people, like I said, spend multiple years in one field and then quit that job and completely change to a different field. So these are the things I want you to think about. Now, it does talk to you in the textbook about the present perfect tense and the simple past, right? This is not going to work very well for my question, because I'm asking you to consider mostly the future, right? However, if you're talking about something in the past that's not specific, right? Like if you're talking about a situation that has given you experience and this is why you're making the decision now, or you will make the decision, then you need to use the past perfect, right? So I have had a lot of experience in part-time jobs. This has taught me to value my job teaching more, because many of the part-time jobs I had were very difficult. Some of them I really enjoyed. So I recognize that I do like working outside, which is a downside for teaching because I'm always stuck in my office, at my computer, or in a classroom. But I worked as a farm assistant for 6 years, and I worked as a landscaper for 1 year. So 7 years of my part-time jobs were working outdoors every day. And I realize now that's one of the things I miss the most. So if I was able to, ideally, if I could get some kind of dream job, I would be teaching on a boat or teaching outdoors somehow. One of my history teachers actually did that. He got a job for a year. Some super rich people put their children, I think there was 12 students on a yacht. And there were several teachers, and they sailed around the world and they taught them on the ship as they sailed from country to country. How cool would that be? But that's not, I don't think that's gonna happen with me. I've passed the point of doing that. My history teacher taught in China for a while. When he was younger, he did like me. He taught ESL in China, and then he got a job on this boat for a year, and he had all kinds of crazy stories. It's pretty exciting teaching on a ship that lands in all parts of the world: South America, Africa, Europe, different ports, Mediterranean. I don't think they went into the Pacific. It was an Atlantic tour. Nonetheless, it's up to you how you want to explain yourself. If you're talking about something non-specific in the past, you can use the present perfect tense to talk about that. I said past perfect, excuse me. I meant present perfect. I just used the past perfect. If something is non-specific in the past and it happened before an event in the past, then you can say, I had been working at the factory when I got a better job. Okay? So if you're talking about your experience, use the past tense. Simple past is much safer. If you don't want to mess around with the perfect tense, I understand, because it gets a little bit tricky to manage. But if you're talking about events in the past, it's non-specific, use the present perfect. If it's coming up to the present and it's generally happened in the past, that's when you use the present perfect, right? And if it's an event in the past that's happened before an event in the past, or it's interrupted, then you can use the past perfect. Okay? So when you're talking about yourself and your experience and what's prepared you for a job, use the past tense. And then, of course, when you're explaining to me what the potential is of the job or what you're going to talk about related to yourself, please use the future tense, of course. Okay? You might use the conditional as well, because if this happens this way, then I will be able to do this, right? If the pandemic continues for several more years, in this job, I would be able to work remotely, or I would be able to work in an environment where there's lots of space, or I would be able to work in a safe environment because this company, has regulations and strict rules. These are the kinds of things I want you to think about when you do your next assignment, okay? So as per the first one and the second one, I'm gonna put the assignment up on the board, and check your assignments and please submit them the same way. If you use Hangul, just save it as a PDF, no problem. If you use Word, just save it normally and just submit the file to me, and I will look them over, and the feedback will be given to you generally. If you want some specific feedback, or you have a particular question, send me an email anytime. But if you're just looking for, was my answer good or not, I'm going to give feedback about particular things to the whole class once I've read these over. The assignments are coming in today, so I haven't looked at them yet. But this week, that's why we haven't had a Zoom lecture yet either, because it's really pointless until I've seen what kind of work you are doing. So once I've collected all the assignments, I will give you some feedback through the video lecture, perhaps maybe a file to describe certain things that people are doing that you need to work on. And before we have our midterm exam, which feels like it's still far away because it's 5 or 6 weeks off, but I know how the semester goes. Suddenly it's midterm time. So keep up on your homework and keep submitting the things, and I'll give you some feedback as we go. And we'll definitely have a supplementary Zoom lecture, not lecture, but information session to go along with the video lectures before we arrange the schedule for the midterm, which is supposed to be on week 8. I think we're week 3, so we're still about 5 weeks off. Okay? So that's all for today. I hope you understand what I'm looking for. And if you have any particular problems, then, as I said, give me an email and I'll get back to you. Thank you for listening, and have a great Monday. Although I'm going to be uploading this today. It's your class technically is on Tuesday, but this is Monday. Have a great Monday. See you next time.